Good afternoon, everyone. Joining us for today's Tech Tuesday. I'm Tanessa, the event coordinator for the FAU Libraries, and I would like to welcome you to the second session of our webinar series on 3D printing. Even though our buildings are closed, the FAU Libraries work to continue to provide support for teaching, research, and learning. We hope that you find that today's webinar will do just that. We are welcoming Crystal Morrow, the coordinator of computer application from the Information Technology Services Department at the FAU Libraries, to introduce you to a web-based application called Tinkercad. We'll be taking questions at various points during the presentation, so please type any that you may have into the chat box. If you have any technical issues, please send us a message and we will try to help you out. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I'd like to turn it over to Crystal.
Alrighty, so this is Tinkercad. I'm basically going over the fundamentals of block modeling. And if you want to follow along, by all means, go to tinkercad.com and make an account. This is through the same company as Autodesk. So if you already have an account with Autodesk, we'll be using the same one. All the information that I'm using is also in the presentation, which will be available online. I'm going to try to jump between both my window here and my presentation window. See how that goes. The short and the long is we're going to be going over moving around in 3D space. I think for a lot of people that's a struggle initially. And then we're going to be going over manipulating objects. And that's moving, aligning, scaling, cutting, and grouping. I would say go ahead and set up a Tinkercad login if you want. I'm going to give a little bit of time and just kind of talk about some other things. And I'm going to show you actually an example of this model, this demo model I've created here, which is what we're going to be recreating today. I actually 3D printed on the resin printer I have here at the house. And this is the scaled down version because the plate on my resin printer is very small. But the model we're building will actually hold a 3" by 3" sticky note in the little container here. And this is like a paperclip holder. But so these models can come out of this program and you can absolutely 3D print them. So I guess a little bit about me. Let me go back so in case you need the information. I guess a little bit about me is I actually have a bachelor's degree in computer animation and media arts. So I've done both block modeling, which is what I'll be doing today in Tinkercad, and then I've also done NURBS, or what's called surface modeling. And the difference between the two types of modeling is block modeling is obviously taking blocks, cutting holes in them, merging them together, or dividing them up and then extruding parts depending on the application you're using. Whereas surface or NURBS modeling is taking points on like a plane and sculpting that. So NURBS modeling is more organic, whereas block modeling, while you can get organic with it, it's more just solid shapes. So, building, functional items is very, very easy in block modeling, whereas if you wanted to make a character, you would definitely want to use something that was more like NURBS or surface modeling. But for today, the basics is block modeling, and block modeling is excellent to get you used to 3D space and 3D modeling in general. Let me make sure I'm in the right window here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and open my Tinker, and okay. So this is the one I've already created. We're basically gonna duplicate this. I think for a lot of people, initially moving around in 3D space can feel a little clunky. Tinkercad has some nice little built-in features, especially this little box up here. So you can quickly click front and you can click the arrow and go to the top. So you can really quickly manipulate around if you get stuck or lost. It'll put you right back on top of that model. But for me, the basics of mouse movement is really the most important part. So, you can hold and right click and that lets you spin. You can spin your camera. And then if you left shift, hold down the left shift and then right click and hold, you can drag up and down. And both these two features let you move around basically a central point. So whatever that middle point is, like right around the center of the camera plane, is what this is going to spin you around or drag you up and down from. So you can always move. Left click is basically selecting objects. I don't have too many objects on the plane. I just have the one combined one here. But this lets you select, drag multiple objects. You can also select individual pieces and hold shift and grab them as well. Um, Middle mouse click is a scroll. So that lets you zoom in and out. If your mouse has a middle click, some mice don't, you can also use that to drag around in 3D space. Personally, I prefer the middle hold because it lets me hold, get to where I want, and then I can zoom in and out as I want. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of hotkeys. We'll go over a few as I go through building out this model. So we're going to be doing a functional design. This is something that you could print and use in your house. We are going to make a couple different shapes. We are actually going to use the one kind of organic modeling piece in Tinkercad that I found. And we're going to cut holes and then combine things. And I will go over each piece. So first things first, let me get my previous model out of the way here. Like I said, if you're keeping up, that's great. If not, you can always go back and go through this step by step. All of the sizes and all the instructions are in here, so you can pretty much follow along at your own pace. Tinkercad has basic shapes. It has a whole bunch of stuff in here that's pre-built. But one of the ones that I found that lets you do a little bit of organic, like restructuring of an object is this one, which is called Extrusion. And that's what we're going to do right now, which will let me make this base plate with a more flat side on one end and a rounder side on the other. There's really no built-in shape that'll do that off the bat. You could combine a box and a circle, but I kind of wanted to show that you can do some custom stuff with an extrusion tool. So it looks just like a cylinder, but up here, as you can see, we have these drag points. I'm going to turn on snap, which will make these clip to the boxes here, so it's all nice and even. So pretty much we're going to drag it up. We're going to stretch this one out so it's a little round on one side. Drag this one down, and we're going to drag this one down and this one down. I'm going to try to not be neurotically perfectionist about this. So as you can see, we now have something that is flat on one side and round on the other. And you can only do this with vector points like this, or like I said, you can combine two objects, but this is really the easier way to do it. It's just fast. But now we need to resize it. So for resizing, you can click on the box, and you have two ways to do that. You can either just see these little white corner scale, these are the scaling buttons right here. They turn red when you hover over them. And if you drag it, you can just drag it out, or you can drag this corner out like this, and you can, change your height. Or if you're doing something that's very specific and you know exactly what size you need it to be, you can click on it and then click on this, and you can just type it straight in. So in this case, we're going to do the height. I already set to 3 millimeters, and then the width and the depth, we're going to make 124 millimeters by 190. And we're going to go through this. I'm going to try to not go through this too fast in case people are following along, but I'm not going to wait up too much. So I don't want this to be an all-day thing. And it would help if I put the right number in there. That's actually, so 128. And as you can see, you might be having to move things around a little bit. And this one is 190. So now we have this very large base plate. Okay. Next, we're going to be doing the actual box, and this is where we're going to do hole cutting, where we're going to actually make a hole, cut it out, and then merge it together to create this little box. So we're going to go back into our shapes. We're going to choose basic shapes. We're going to pick the box, and we're just going to drop it on in there. So again, we're going to resize, and this one was 100 by 100, and you just drag it back over. I believe the height was 15. Yeah. Now this is where I'm going to show you something else that you can do. If you have an object that you want to have especially like a square like this, slightly softer edges, you can add this radius tool. Now you can actually push this to a circle if you push it all the way down. But if you just want a nice, slight little soft edge, you can just add a bevel to it. I usually do like 2 or 3, just so it's not such a hard edge. Um, and so that's going to be this bottom piece. Our next piece is the inside, and this is where we're actually going to cut a hole. So we're going to drag it and drop it. And you can either make it a hole now, or you can make it a hole later. That's just preference. Um, and we're going to do the same thing. Now, I measured, sticky notes are 3 inches by 3 inches, which is 76.2 millimeters. And I'm going to make this inner square just a little bit bigger so there's some wiggle space. So 76.4 and 76.4. Like I said, for exact measurement, it's just usually better to type it in. So now we want this centered. We don't, if you drag it in here, you may not have it perfectly centered. There's an alignment tool you can use. So you select one object, and then you can shift select the second object. And up here, there's an alignment tool. You can either click this or just hit L, which is the hotkey, and you'll see these little dots show up. And this lets you align this into the center. So you can see it kind of gives you a preview when you hover over one of where it's going to move it. So we're going to do this one, and we're going to do this one, and that should put it exactly in the center. Now this isn't, this doesn't look like this, and that's because we haven't grouped them. So you take your object and your hole, and you go up here to group, which is Control G as the hotkey. So you hit Control G, and it will cut that hole out for you. And now you have a box with a hole in it. So up next, I added a little extra piece, which is this curved cutout here. And this is just in case you do put sticky notes in there, you want to be able to like grab them out with your thumb. So we're going to go back into basic shapes. We're going to grab a sphere. Just put it right here because we're going to align it later anyway, so it doesn't really matter quite where it goes. And we're going to change its dimensions. I mean, truthfully, you could be a little more flexible with this. It's really preference. You could just drag it out. You could, drag it up. So as you can see, this little arrow here lets me drag it up because I don't really want it cutting all the way down to the bottom. Okay, like that. That'll be like what it cuts out. So in this case, I'm actually adjusting it before I make it into a hole. But if I make it a hole, you can kind of see it's really preference at this point. So now I could use the exact measurements, which I think I said in here. Let's see. Looks like 51 by 53. Oop, not 5. And then, yeah, that was it. But as you can see, when it's a little bit bigger, it does push further too far down because I still want that lip at the bottom. So I'm basically just going to grab this arrow, and depending on which angle you're looking at will depend on where the arrow shows up. So if I'm under the plane, the move arrow is going to be below it, and if I'm above the plane, it's going to show up above it. So I'm just going to move it up a little bit, and now I'm going to go back to align. So I have this object selected. I hit Shift to grab the second object, and then I hit the Align tool. And we're going to center it down the center. We really don't need to do any other ones because it's going to push it to the middle or move it up, and we don't want that. And then next, we're going to group it, and it should cut that hole out. Now, let's say you mess something up, and you're like, I need to ungroup. I need to fix that. I need to change it. You can always come back up here and ungroup it, and the object will come right back. And you can manipulate it more, and then shift select and rejoin it together. And so we have a paperclip or a sticky note holder. So up next, I will be doing the cup, and this is a couple different parts. This is going to go over some aspects of printing that you do need to know as well, and I'll get there when we get there. So I'll show you. So for this piece, we're going to scroll down and find the half sphere. It puts it on its face down. So this will let me show you how to rotate because we want this obviously to be the bottom of the cup. You can click on the arrows and you can manually drag it, and it kind of clips into place at 180 degrees and 90 degrees. And if you hold the shift key, it locks. See how it changes? If I hold the shift key, you get quarter turns. So you can do it that way, or you can click on the rotating arrow. There we go. And you can just type in 180, and it'll do it that way as well. So I believe the height, I set it to 27, and then the width was 78 and 78. It seems very, very big. Hold on, maybe I missed something. Yeah, I guess that's it. Okay, that does seem kind of big. We'll just keep going with it. All right, so to do the next piece, we're going to use a cylinder. And so we're going to take a cylinder, and this is the part where I was talking about where it comes to how your print's going to look when it comes out of this printer. And I'm going to show you as soon as I get this in place and scaled. So we're going to make it the same size as the half circle, which was, I believe I said 78 by 78. And I think it was 28. Really, the heights, you can make the height anything you want. Okay. So obviously, we're going to have to align this because they don't, it's not fitting exactly. So we're going to grab both objects, and we're going to hit the Align tool. And we're going to swing up so I can find the bottom align. So we're going to do this way and this way, and that should center them. Okay. Now that gap's fine because we can just push it down. And honestly, even if you combine things and the object's inside the other object, here I'll show you, it will combine it. But you can see you have that little bit of tessellation in here. And this is what I wanted to show you when it comes to 3D printing stuff, especially when you're combining stuff. The bottom half sphere has more facets on it than the top. So we have to adjust the amount of sides that the top has. So let me uncombine, and I'm going to click on the object. Let me out. Hold on. My mouse is being a little weird, sorry. There it is. Okay, so you can see here it has a sides option. So you can actually increase the amount of sides very, very rapidly with this. In this case, we need about 36, and this lined up almost perfectly with the size of my bottom sphere. So as you can see now, when this prints, you won't get that big like differentiation between the two parts, even when it's combined. So I'm going to add a little bit of a bevel just so the top's a little softer. And it really didn't affect the bottom too much. And like I said, now that we have the, I'm going to actually push it so you can see what I'm talking about. So I pushed the bevel really, really hard. So now it has a much deeper bevel. And you can actually see that bevel line. If I drag this up a little bit, see, if they were actually touching perfectly, you would actually get that crease across the side. Now, if you want a crease in it, cool, leave it. But if you don't, you can just push the object down into the other object a little bit. And then just like before, you just shift select and you join them. And then you have a little bowl. To cut the inside, it's pretty straightforward. You can duplicate objects just like you would, Control C, Control V. So you grab the object, Control C, Control V, and it makes a copy. Or you can use the built-in up here, which is called the mirror tool, and it should mirror. Hope if I actually click the right thing. Oh, well, I don't know, that's kind of weird. Okay. So we're going to make this a hole. And I'm going to bring the size down a little bit so it fits inside. Let me switch my things here. at 70, let me double check my numbers here, 74. So just a couple millimeters smaller, so 74 by 74. And then make sure you scale it up just a bit because you want that hole to be above the solid object. Or, you know, when it cuts, it'll actually cut it with like a top or like a little bit of a lip on it. So we're going to align it again. So it's nice and centered. It helps if I hit the right thing. Okay, so when they're gray like this, you see how it's gray? That means that those two objects are aligned with each other, that you've already done the centering. So now we're going to group it. And just like that, you have a bowl. And then to prep this object to print, we're going to combine the whole thing like this one, so it's one solid piece. Because right now you can droop, you can, like that, you can drag everything around independently. It also might be worth it to go ahead and align these down the center of the plane. So I'm going to go ahead and push them all to the center like that. So that way now they're perfectly centered on that plate. And then we're going to just left click, hold, drag, select them all. You're going to do Control G, which will group them. And there it goes. And so now we can actually export this object and prep it for printing. And, you know, I'll show it again. So yeah, I don't know where you can see it. But this is off the resin printer, so it printed up pretty good. It did pretty good. And now I don't know how much people know about print files or not, but in Tinkercad and, you know, most 3D programs, you have a couple options. The biggest one for 3D printing is, you know, .obj files or STL files. I haven't really used the GLB files, but I actually want to say these are more for like virtual like environments for like VR stuff. And obviously SVGs is more like for laser cutting and things like that because it's that's what I'm looking for, vector. Okay, so the difference between an object file and an STL file. An STL file is an old file type. It's been around forever, and it's a very small file type. So when you save this out as an STL, it is going to basically re-render your file and add tessellation, which is basically interlocking triangles that cover the entire object. And what this does is it makes the file very, very small. And it also makes it pretty much uneditable as well. So once it's an STL, you're really not going to have much luck like modifying that file because tessellation kind of removes, I'm trying to get the right word. It just, I don't know, it's like the mesh just isn't the same. You'll have a harder time modifying that file once it's an STL. Whereas object files, which are these guys, they're a little bit of a newer file type, and they have a lot more information. You know, you can have different geometry, quadrilaterals, polygons, hexagons are all in that export. So you get a lot more detail in your mesh, and it's smoother. And if you ever hop on like you know, the free STL websites where you can grab files, you don't see object files too often, and a lot of that is probably because the owners of those files want to keep their object files to themselves because that's what they can edit. And basically just hit your object, export it out, and that's pretty much that. It saves it, and you can send it straight to your printer. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know I kind of went a little bit quick, but Vanessa, you have anything or no?
This time.
Okay. I mean, I can leave it open for a bit if anybody has anything they want, even if they are trying to follow along and they want me to answer something, that's fine too. Like I said, you can always go back through this on your own. This file is available, so you can just practice cutting objects and moving. Well, I guess that's it then. If I have no questions.
Well, thank you again for joining us in a special putting together this presentation. You will receive an email with a brief survey you will fill out just to help us plan future presentations. We'll also share the link to the recording of this session on our YouTube. To stay up to date on our upcoming events, follow us on all social media channels at FAU Libraries. Crystal, if you could also just drop your email address in the chat box in case anyone does have any follow-up questions after this. Other than that, thank you all. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody.